سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم سبحانك لا فهم لنا إلا ما فهمتنا إنك أنت الجواد الكريم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي وأفوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد اللهم صل صلاة كاملة وسلم سلاما تاما على سيدنا محمد الذي تنحل به العقد وتنفرج به الكرب وتقضى به الحوائج وتنال به الرغائب وحسن الخواتم ويستسقى الغمام بوجهه الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه في كل لمحة ونفس بعدد كل معلوم لك اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا وقلبا خاشعا ولسانا ذاكرا وشاكرا وتوبة نصوحا رب يسر ولا تعسر رب تمم بالخير رب زدني علما وفهما وألحقنا بالصالحين يا حي يا قيوم يا ذا الجلال والإكرام برحمتك استغيث لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My respected brothers and very respected sisters and everybody watching us, welcome to our Sunday evening fiqh class where we learn the basic essential Islamic knowledge series, and inshallah we'll continue with Kitab al-Tahara, the second unit in our series, in our lectures, in our talks, in our course, Purification, Kitab al-Tahara. We have already covered a few pages in this regard, and inshallah today I intend to go through and continue with where we have left off last time, inshallah ta'ala. Let's see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows us this evening. I intend to finish just a little bit after Maghrib enters Melbourne time. So, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, we will cover as much as we need to. Then we will continue with it the following week, inshallah ta'ala. If you can recall, we basically said the concept of najasa, impurity in Islam, is of two types. One is legal impurity, that is nothing substantial, nothing physical, nothing quantifiable, but the Sharia deems it to be impure. And there are two types, the lesser impurity and the higher impurity. That is, if hadath of two types, hukmi and haqiqi. Najasa is also what you call hukmi and haqiqi. In the hukmi sense, if you don't have wudu, you need to make wudu, because you do not qualify to do your prayer, salat, the ritual prayer, without wudu, so you need to do your wudu. And if you require ghusl, you need to make ghusl before you can do anything else that is prohibited by the lack of ghusl. And in terms of najasa haqiqi, the real visible dirt, impurity, there are also two types. One is called khafifa, light impurity. We went through the details last week. And also partly we went through the second type, which is najasa ghalidha, gross impurity, heavy impurity. And many people asked questions during the week. They sent me text messages to clarify certain things. Inshallah ta'ala, briefly I'm going to go through very quickly this particular section so we can continue from the place that we left off last week. We'll continue from there, inshallah ta'ala. The following things are real gross impurity. Human or baby urine. Some people argue that babies are pure. I said, I didn't say babies are impure. Babies are beautiful creatures. But urine is a urine, whether it comes out from a grown-up person or a child, a baby. It is always, it's a ghalidha. Urine of a donkey or an animal whose flesh is haram is also ghalidha, is heavy impurity. The excrements of humans and four-legged beasts, is also ghalidha. The blood of all animals and human beings, excluding the blood of fish and insects, all ghalidha, according to Hanafi school we mentioned. In any alcohol, liquid form, we're talking about the one that people drink. I'm not talking about the alcohol that people swipe to before they give you an injection. Not that one. We're talking about the ones that people drink, made out of a fermented drink that intoxicates you. Doesn't matter what name it carries, whether it is wine, it is a vodka, or it's a cognac, or if it's whatever it is all haram. To consume is one thing, but in their essence, when they touch your body, your clothing, they are regarded as najasa ghalidha. They are heavy impurity. And the flesh of dead animals, whether they die naturally or not properly slaughtered, they die according to Sharia, they will be regarded as najasa ghalidha, heavy impurity, if they died on their own. The milk of animals whose flesh is haram to eat is also regarded as ghalidha, impurity. So if you insist on, somebody said to you that in order to maintain your vitality and beauty, you must drink leopard's milk, and this is haram to do so, and the actual milk itself is regarded as najasa ghalidha. And the sweat and the saliva of animals whose leftover food is considered impure, like pigs and dogs and elephants, or any ferocious four-legged animals whose flesh is haram to eat, is also najasa ghalidha. But we're not talking about cats. Cats are a special case. The bones, the skin, meat, or any byproduct of the pig, swine is haram. Anything and everything. Unfortunately, Muslims went through a stage in their lives, perhaps 50 years ago. Great-parents can understand, their grandparents can probably relate to. They used to produce without Muslims knowing, because we went through such a terrible period in our history. They used to make brushes for men to shave their beards, which is a different sin altogether. They used to make the bristles of these brushes made out of pig's hair. They even used to have toothbrushes made out of pig's hair. So can you imagine that people, Muslims, are brushing their teeth with pig's hair? Anything to do with pig, any byproduct of pig, li'aynihi, we said last time, it is haram to consume, but it is also najas. Some people were asking, what if I were to work in a pizza shop where they have ham, and I need to get this job, there is no other job? That's a different question altogether. Depending on certain circumstances, it can become permissible to work in such place, but it is not something that is preferable. And if you have an issue like this, you give me a call, contact me, and inshallah I will try to clarify those points also for you. The things that come out of a human body, which nullifies a person's wudu, breaks a person's wudu, such as flowing blood, mani, semen, madhi, wadi, vaginal fluid, blood of istihada, hayd, and nifas, pus and vomit. These things are regarded as najasa ghalidha. Anything that breaks your wudu. All these things break your wudu if you happen to have one. And we went and explained these in detail last week. The excusable amount of gross impurity on a person's body on their clothing under certain circumstances. A spot of ghalidha, a urine stain, for example, size of a 50 cents coin, or the better way of calculating is inside of your palm, the middle section here. It's about 50 cents size, Australian. If you do not have access to clean, fresh clothing, if you do not have access to water, you work in a rural setting, you're picking fruits, or there is the nearest water is, a couple of miles away, you don't have access to water, or you cannot go back home, you cannot get changed, but you need to do your salat. If the amount is in terms of liquid, in terms of stain, liquid stain, is less than a hand of a palm, small, 50 cent size, it is permissible for you to do your salat with that stain. Make a wudu and do your salat. If it's more than that, you cannot pray with it. You need to take it off, you need to change it, you need to do something with it, but you cannot pray with it. But nonetheless, you still have to do your salat. And if it's something, a dry substance, maximum, somebody might say 2.5 to 3 grams, some stain, perhaps a mark in your underwear, or somewhere else, maybe a dropping of another animal, that najasa ghalidha, and there is no way of cleaning this. It's impossible because you're in that environment. Nonetheless, you need to do your salat, you can do it. But it is under all circumstances, if you have access to water, it is wajib to wash it first. Wajib to wash it first. But you don't have any form of access to cleansing environment, then it is permissible to do your salat in that state. I think this is the spot where we have stopped last week. Further points to learn. If the najasa ghalidha in a solid state, for example feces, baby's poo-poo, falls on the body or your clothing, washing will be wajib. You cannot just say, oh, it's my baby's poo-poo, it's so special. No, ghalidha, najasa is najasa always. You cannot do your salat. You cannot perform your ibadah because you have najasa on you. If the weight of the impurity is more than 3.5 grams, you need to wash. Otherwise, you have no option. If najasa ghalidha in a liquid state, example, blood falls on your body or clothing, pus perhaps, washing is wajib. If the impurity covers an area greater than the size of a dirham, that is. Dirham is a silver coin, 50 cent size, which is the size of a hollow of a palm of your hand. If najasa ghalidha is the size of a dirham or less, then salat performed in this matter will be discharged, valid, provided that you don't have access to clean clothes, water to wash, and you're stuck with this. The condition of minimum quantity of impurities, that is quarter of the area for najasa khafifa, light impurity, and a dirham size of najasa ghalidha, does not mean that the impurities in these little quantities should not be washed away. It merely means that if one did perform one's salat with the body or the garments soiled by this minimum allowed quantities, impurity, the salat will be valid. Despite this, to perform salat without washing even the minimum allowed limit is makruh. Yes, it is valid. Yes, it is acceptable, but it is makruh. Legally, makruh means the opposite of sunnah. There are two types of makruhs, as we know in our af'al al-mukallafin that when we covered. Makruh tahrimi, or tahriman makruh, close to haram, and tanzihan makruh, or makruh tanzihi, close to halal. So the variance, the degree of severity depends on the actual action itself. In other words, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam never and ever prayed in his life. He never performed any makruh, for that matter, any reprehensible act, even with the minimum allowed limit, the limit for ghalidha or khafifa impurity. The reward, the hasanat, the thawab, the spiritual benefit, and the barakah of the salat are reduced by the presence of any impurity, no matter how little it is, not only on our clothing, but also in our place that we, on our body, also the place in which we do our salat. We need to make sure that you are doing an act of purity and ibadah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It must fulfill all the conditions, first of which is tahara, cleanliness. The excusable amounts of lesser impurity. A spot of lesser impurity, if it should fall on the cover or on and cover over less than a quarter of the total area of a section, a sleeve, collar, etc., of your clothing, will not prevent one from making prayer in those clothes, as the amount is too slight. Though, if that same amount were to fall into a small amount of water, it would render the water unusable for the purposes of purification, such as wudu and the purification bath, that is ghusl. So although in your clothing it falls into that urine or any other, that liquid state, that where when push comes to shove, when you're forced to, you have no other option, you can actually do your salat. But if that same amount were to fall into a clear water, that water will become najis. And you cannot use this particular water for making wudu or ghusl. However, any amount of lesser impurity, najasa khafifa, above the excusable amount on one's person or clothing will prevent one from performing prayer. When you have anything above this, you need to deal with it. You need to change your clothes, or you need to make sure that you take it off, you wash your body, and do your salat again with different clothes, or just cover your awrah, but nonetheless you still have to do it. If you're living in a country setting, a rural setting, or you have some pets in your house, or some chickens in your backyard, or some fowls in your backyard, or kangaroos in your backyard, the following topic is related to us: leftover food of other animals and humans. The leftovers of humans, in other words, the food that has come in contact with the saliva of the person, leftover food or drink which has come into contact with saliva of humans, even if they are disbelievers, kafir. Horses, remember horses have special status, and animals whose flesh is halal. In the Sharia, it is regarded as pure, tahir. Their perspiration, the above that we mentioned, human beings or horses or animals whose flesh is halal, like goats, sheep, cow, yes? Their perspiration, sweat, and the perspiration of donkeys and mules and horses are tahir, pure. So if you're riding a horse, riding a donkey, and they've been running, and the sweat begins to contacts with your skin or your clothing, that is pure. You can do your salat with it, not a problem. the leftovers of cats, mice, and other household animals and pests like lizards, and the leftovers of birds whose flesh is haram, like falcons and vultures, is disliked or makruh. The leftover of pigs, dogs, elephants, and four-legged animals whose flesh is haram, except a cat and those like it, as was mentioned above, the halal animals. Is absolutely najis, absolutely haram, impure. So pigs, we don't keep pigs. That's normal. If you were to come in contact with a farm that you happen to go and visit, then you need to consider this particular rule. But dogs, people constantly ask about dogs. In the Sharia, the animal itself is not haram to keep. You can keep a dog as a watchdog to protect your property, not a problem, provided that you fulfill the rights towards the dog. You feed the dog, take care of the dog, and take them to vet and make sure that everything is fine. But because dogs, such animals, such loyal animals, amazing, beautiful animals, they show their affection towards you, their loyalty towards you by licking you, your hand, your clothing, your face, your hand. Their saliva itself is najis. Saliva itself is najis. You can wash it. Imam Shafi and the Shafi school is very strict in this one, and you need to wash it in several times in certain manner in order for your clothing to become clean. That's why you see the people from predominantly Shafi, from Indonesia, Malaysia, when they see a dog, they run away. They're not afraid of the dog. They're not scared of the dog. They just don't want their dog to come and sniff and touch their nose and perhaps their tongue onto their clothing, because that's regarded as najis. Otherwise, dogs themselves are not najis. Cats, on the other hand, has a special status. There are many ahadith of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in this regard. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says they just walk amongst your feet. Their leftover is clean, edible. I mean, you don't go and eat the leftover of a cat, but if you gave something to the cat and there's some that you can eat, no problem. But what if they're eating a mice? Isn't that najis? Yes, it is najis. What is here? Where they have it in their mouth, the tail is coming out, they swallowed, finished. They're still clean. But while they're eating it, of course, that particular item, that mice, the mouse, is perhaps haram. But the cat itself, they constantly cleanse themselves. They can be kept inside the house. Yes, it is halal to do so. But having a chihuahua in the house and in your bed, and your best friend, there is an issue in this one. Because a dog's saliva is still dog saliva, regardless of the size of the dog, whether how cute and so beautiful they are. We're not talking about how cute and how beautiful, how loyal they are. We're not questioning this. It's legal impurity, the najasa ghalidha, the heavy impurity that the saliva carries. And scientifically they say it is the most bacteria full, maybe infectious sometimes. It can have problems with the dogs. But we're not saying the dogs are bad. Please don't see me as a dog hater or anything as such. I love dogs, sure, but I don't keep them inside my house. You can keep it outside as a shepherd dog, as a watchdog, as a security dog, or whatever dog. And they have a purpose. They are very loyal animals. But their saliva and their nose, the wetness, that when they touch, it renders that item, whatever it touches, najis. So you need to take precaution not to soil your clothing and if you did, you need to wash it. And cups that you eat from, you need to wash it 7 times, according to the fiqh, and one of them including with soil. Then you need to really rub it into soil. The bacteria within the soil also kills that bacteria. So, inshallah, the leftovers of pigs and dogs and elephants and animals whose flesh is haram is najis and impure. We just leave it at that, inshallah ta'ala. We don't make it any more difficult. Now, this is an area where everybody asks. Flecks of urine, when all but invisible, the splashes that's so micro, so small that it is invisible to the eye. When you sit on the toilet seat, yeah, when you urinate, it splashes back onto your skin, but you don't see anything, you don't feel anything. So, or maybe you're just squatting outside and you're passing urine, or you're doing your number 2, and perhaps it's splashed onto your clothing that you can see, you're aware of. You need to wash, that's no question. But we're talking about microscopic size, that invisible to the eye, like the head of a pin. In the Sharia, they're excusable, as long as the total area covered by them does not exceed that of a dirham that we mentioned before, as mentioned before. That's visible, that's not invisible. So you have waswasa. You constantly worry. Yes, you must take care of your clothing when you go to the bathroom, make sure that it does not splash onto you, but you can't always just jump into the shower each time after you go to the toilet. That's impractical, that's difficulty in our religion. So some of our mashayikh tell us, teachers, fuqaha, you just wet your hand, but you're not sure, just a waswasa. You don't have any actual proof that your clothing has soiled, undergarments has soiled, all these splashes that you can see. You can see is different, but you cannot see. In that regard, just wet your hand with the clean water, just sprinkle into your underwear or onto your leg so that you don't know who's who. Because you're not responsible for the flecks of urine that's splashed, that's so minute, so small, so you don't make it a big issue out of this and pray with waswasa. Is my wudu accepted, not accepted? Is my wudu accepted, not accepted? This is a different problem altogether. It creates a different problem altogether. The flecks of urine the size of the head of a pin are excusable on clothing for the acceptability of salat, prayer, even if the total amount exceeds a dirham. In one of our main Hanafi fiqh books, in Maraq al-Falah, the same is also mentioned in Ibn Abidin's Radd al-Mukhtar. However, if such a garment is put into water, that you took your galabiyya, you think that there is some, or your skirt, whatever the case is, you think that there is a splash, yeah, and there is a size of a dirham, a little bit more perhaps, you put into a clean clothing, yes, into water, or the flecks of urine splash into clean drinkable water, or that water that you're going to use to make your wudu, which is sometimes in bathrooms in certain parts of the world. There is only one hose in the toilet. You do your your toilet. You do urinate, you relieve yourself, but the water splashes into the other bucket of water that you're going to make ghusl from or to make wudu from. You have to make sure that water does not splash into, or the urine does not splash into, that najis water does not splash into that particular water, the bucket, that you're going to use it later for wudu or ghusl. Make sure they are separate, far away from each other. But if they were to fall into it, that quantity, that flecks of urine themselves, into a small quantity of water, it renders the water impure. But the water is such a large quantity, huge. Some places have that because it is such a minute amount. And if that water is perhaps a flowing water, there is the hose coming from one end and it just constantly flows the other side, then nothing happens. Let us look at a few more further points in this regard. The urine and the feces, the excreta of even a milk-drinking infant, a baby, is najasa ghalidha. Yeah? Najasa ghalidha. Their vomit is also najasa ghalidha. Baby's vomit. You cannot say, oh, what can we do? Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Once it goes into the baby, they have sometimes influx. Yeah? The parents will know they tap on it, tap their back until baby burps. Otherwise, all that milk and everything else that the baby drank will come out. And if it goes onto your clothing, you need to clean that. You cannot pray with that one. Besides fowls, ducks, and the wild ducks, the droppings of all halal birds are not regarded as impurity. The droppings and the urine of bats are not regarded as impurity. The bones, hair, skin, etc. of a pig are najas, impure, and of najasa ghalidha type. However, if these are burnt, reduced to ash, the ash will be regarded as tahir. This might seem to be a little confusing. Islamic law is so precise. When a substance changes its form, let me put it differently. There are certain ways of cleansing an item. The first one is with water. Yeah? Then sometimes cooking, boiling. Yeah? Sometimes in the fire. If the form, the substance changes from one chemical to another chemical, the previous state is abolished. In the case of bones and hair, if they are burnt into ashes, the ashes that goes into the air is not regarded as still najas. Let me give you a practical example that you might even be surprised to hear. In certain parts of the world, which I've seen several times, they have salt lakes. The saline levels, the salt levels so high, no animal lives in that particular water. And comes the summertime, it just all the water evaporates, and all the water goes into the ground, and pure salt is left outside. And people, the companies usually bring trucks upon trucks, and they take the salt and they purify it, or they do some process, and they put in the packets and sell in the supermarkets. That's their business. What if a donkey, an animal, even a pig for that matter, goes into the salt lake when it's watery, it has water, because summertime or the winter time, and they went into deep, they can't get out and they're stuck there, and they died. They fall into the water, into the salty water. A time has passed over them, perhaps a couple of years, couple of decades, Allahu alam what, depending on the salinity level of the water, and that particular animal, which is haram to eat in the first place, donkey, horse, whatever the case, the pig, mule, turned into pure salt, including bone, skin, and everything just turned into salt. According to Sharia, because it has changed its original form into some other form, that salt is absolutely halal to consume. Yes, if a donkey falls into a lake and turns into salt, lake salt, and turns into a salt, that salt is pure and that salt can be consumed. Not a problem. There are a few cases as such in the Islamic law. For example, wine. Wine is absolutely najis and it's haram to consume. If the fermentation process within the bottle goes too long, and so much so that that fermentation is no longer, that turns the wine into something else, a vinegar. We call it vinegar. Sometimes when you see in supermarket shelves, they said wine vinegar. Actually, there's no wine in it. It turns into, it was wine before, turned into vinegar. That vinegar is pure, that vinegar can be consumed. But if it was in its previous state, because there's no change in state, it was the alcohol level, the ethanol level, that wine was in that level, maintained. Yes, there is no further fermentation to change its acidity into vinegar. It is haram. But as soon as it turns into a vinegar, that vinegar becomes halal to consume. The saliva of dogs, pigs, and all beasts of prey is najasa ghalidha type. All beasts of prey. The smoke and the vapor of an impurity are pure because chemically, physically, it changed into something else. Fruit worms. Maybe in Australia, this is one of the greatest battles. In certain states, it can kill the whole industry of orchards and growing fruits if fruit flies come in. But in Muslim world, the organic farming, worms are part of life. That happens right in the middle of you eating a beautiful apricot, and you bite one, in the middle you see a worm, or dead worm for that matter. Perhaps dead worm you should not eat, but if it's a live worm, Islamically, some of our scholars will say it is permissible to eat. It is actually makruh to search for every fruit, whether it has any worms in it or not. So the fruit worms are tahir, pure, legally, in the Islamic law. Their presence does not render the fruit impure. However, it is not permissible to eat these worms knowingly. Oh, I'm going to have a witchetty grub in my fruit, open up, oh, there's another one, I pick and eat. But if you accidentally ate, it's all gone, and you just realize there was a worm inside, it's okay. A decayed egg of halal bird is tahir, pure, provided that it is not broken. But once it's broken, the eggshell is still unbroken, still tahir. But as soon as you open it, it's rotten, it is not pure. Now this is quite interesting, the next point. The scales on the skin of a snake, still living, walking around, the Slytherin, yes, it is regarded as tahir. It is not najis. However, every year or every 2 years, certain, I don't know, I'm not an expert in snake life or the snake biology, they need to shed their skins. And they leave the skins in the corner. You can see that it's a shed of skin of a snake. That particular shed off, leftover skin of a snake is regarded as najis, pure, impure. Water used to wash something impure also becomes najis. Yeah? When as soon as clean water touches that something impure and the leftover that is dropping, yeah, it is also regarded as impure, najis. Saliva of a dead person, a mayyit, janaza, mayyit, is also najis. The saliva which flows from the mouth of a sleeping person is not najis. Man, you made a mess on the pillow. Oh, we have to wash Elsa's pillow. Yeah, washing the pillow is one thing, but it is not najis technically speaking. The saliva of a human being, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, is pure, it is not najis. Another item, and inshallah we'll finish by this page. Expired foodstuffs, which has decayed on it, rotting green stuff on it, is actually not najis. Nevertheless, it should not be consumed. If you have any alcohol, you should throw it away. But do not throw away your blue cheese. They by design, they have that rot inside that is consumable. Water in which some tahir object was washed. Example, an apple was washed. Yes? The water, because it's apple is clean, the water is also clean. You wash it in the water, just like they dab it in and just wash it, it's done. Wudu actually can be made with such water, provided the flow of the water, that is its fluid state, has not been impaired. In other words, the apple was not such dirty that it has some other stuff on it. When you put in the water, the color, the smell of the water changed. You cannot use this for wudu. But it's the clean apple, just for, a caution. You just dabbed it into the water. And that water is still clean, and you can make wudu from this. Once it becomes najis due to other circumstances, there is no way of purifying that water thereafter. So you need to use it for other purposes, like you throw it in your garden, let the plants consume it. Najis water cannot be used for anything. It is not permissible to give najis water to animals to drink. Filth. Do not use it in the mixing of mortar to build a house, to build a place for you, because that's part of your home also. But for the garden, you can use it. Inshallah, we shall stop here. Maghrib is upon us. Next week, 7:30, we shall continue with our journey from this page onwards. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me for my own mistakes. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put barakah into our learning. Make us, inshallah, amongst the salihin, sadiqeen, Muslims who have beneficial knowledge for their akhirah and for their dunya, and they acquire necessary fiqh knowledge in every sense of the word, so that it facilitates the practicing of Islam correctly. Wa akhiru da'wana in alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Subhanaka Allahumma bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Wahdaka la sharika lak. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.